Hey everybody, this is Dustin Neely, lead pastor of Crossing Church in Louisville, Kentucky. And I wanted to take just a moment today to give you my top 5 books for church planters. Now there's plenty of books out there for church planting and ministry development, but if I was stranded on a desert island and I can only have 5 to coach a bunch of guys, here's the 5 I would take with me. The first is Radical Reformission by Mark Driscoll. As you guys know, Driscoll has become very popular and influential among the church planting community, and I think it's for good reason. In this book, he lays out a very practical, very biblical, and very missiological understanding to the work of the church in regard especially to church planting. I think Radical Reformission is a must-have on any church planter's shelf. Now second, almost as a companion to that book, is his book called Confessions of a Reformissionary Rev. And what he's talking about here is really his own story. Now, most of us are not going to pastor churches like Mars Hill. We're not going to see the things that Mark has seen. But the principles that emerge from his own story in this book are absolutely amazing and reproducible across many models and across most contexts. So I highly recommend this to young men who are interested in church planting, who want to see what it's really like. And Mark, through his own story, gives us many, many gold nuggets. Now, the third book that I would recommend is not as well known, but very important. It's called Church Planting Landmines, and it's by Tom Niebel and Gary Rohrmeyer. And in this book, they explore mistakes to avoid between years 2 through 10 in a church plant. They cover everything from misfiring on hiring, to a lack of personal evangelism, to not dealing with your own health and growth as a planter. And in this book, they cover a lot of mistakes that churches make and that ultimately lead to their demise. And they wrote it for years 2 through 10, but I require it as reading for the guys that I coach before they ever go out to plant. Because if you can avoid those landmines on the front end, well, that's a lot better than doing damage control on the back end. So that's a must-have book, Church Planting Landmines. The next book I would give you is written by Andy Stanley. It's called The Next Generation Leader. There's a lot of stuff out there from a lot of different perspectives on leadership, but I think in just kind of a one-stop shop, there's some principles in here that I think are amazing and very helpful, and it's also not a very long book. Andy has a good handle on what it's like to be a younger leader, and most church planters today are younger men, and he writes well and uses good illustrations, and so I highly recommend that. And the final book is more of a best practice book, also from Andy Stanley, Reggie Joiner, and Lane Jones. It's called 7 Practices of Effective Ministry. Now, the first part of the book is told kind of in a fable form, which, you know, some people are into that and some people aren't. But the back half of the book, he illuminates 7 principles that have been absolutely essential in us getting the job done here in our context. He talks a lot about teaching less for more, which you may or may not have the same perspective on that. I don't fully agree with that, but the concept is beautiful, and it applies to small groups, kids ministry, preaching, all kinds of different things. He also talks about narrowing the focus to make a greater impact, clarifying the when, thinking steps and not programs. And I think as kind of if you only get one best practice book, this is one of the best books that you can have because it plays in so many different environments in your church plant. So if I had a longer list, I would give you many more than 5 books. But if I only get 5, those are the 5 that you should get. Radical Reformission by Driscoll, Confessions by Driscoll, Church Planting Landmines by Niebel and Rohrmeyer, Next Generation Leader by Andy Stanley, and 7 Practices of Effective Ministry by Stanley, Joiner, and Jones.